Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the foundations of management, how we understand it, how we practice it.
Yeah, we're looking at a lecture that really digs into the history, the philosophies behind it all.
Our mission here is basically to give you a shortcut, right? To get the core ideas from this lecture, understand how management thinking evolved, and why it still matters today.
Exactly. And we'll focus on two main schools of thought.
Yeah.
First, there's classical management.
The sort of the original framework builders.
Pretty much, yeah. Focused on structure, efficiency, and then the human relations school, which took a very different angle, focusing much more on.
Okay, so classical management that kicked off late 19th, early 20th century. Big industrial changes happening then.
Right, that's the context. And then human relations came along more mid 20th century, partly as a reaction, but also.
And we should mention there are some kind of aha moments in here, how the focus shifts from just like pure efficiency
to suddenly realizing human side of things, often in ways they didn't expect.
Okay, let's dive in. Classical management. This was the big one early on, wasn't it? All about efficiency, systems, clear structure.
Oh, absolutely. It was dominant. The main goal was to bring some kind of order, some science to how businesses were run. Before that, it could be pretty chaotic.
Makes sense. So within classical management, who's first up? Taylor. Scientific management.
Yeah, Frederick Winslow Taylor. His big idea was applying to everything.
How so? What did that look like?
Well, he believed you could analyze any job, break it down, and find the one best way to do it scientifically. This meant, time and motion studies.
Literally timing people.
Literally timing them, watching every move, cutting out anything unnecessary, all to make it faster, more efficient.
Peak efficiency at the task level. He had that quote, didn't he? Something about the system being first.
He did. In the past, the man has been first.
Yeah.
In the future, the system must be first.
Wow. That's pretty direct. Tells you a lot about the priority.
It really does. The optimized process over maybe individual worker comfort or preference, it definitely raises questions.
Yeah. Wonder how it felt to be the man in that system. So what else did Taylor bring to the table besides the core idea?
Well, the time and motion studies, obviously. That led to scientific task design, standardizing jobs.
Meaning?
Paid people more per item if they produced above the standard. Output to pay.
Okay. Incentive based on speed.
Exactly. And finally, functional foremanship.
Right, you mentioned that. Multiple bosses.
Yeah, specialized supervisors. Instead of one general boss, you'd have different experts overseeing different parts of the job. Maybe one for quality, one for speed, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay, so can we see this in action anywhere, like a real world example?
A great sort of later example that really embodies Taylor's principles is McDonald's, their speedy system.
Yeah. Makes total sense. Burger making, fry cooking.
Every single step. Standardized, timed, designed for maximum efficiency. The layout, the movements.
It's the whole assembly line approach. And you see the results, right? Consistency, speed, low cost.
Definitely. It's classic scientific management in practice, even if it came later.
Okay. So Taylor laid a lot of groundwork. What about the Gilbreths? Frank and Lillian, they're often mentioned too.
Yes, a fascinating husband and wife team. They were also huge proponents of time and motion studies, building on Taylor's.
But with their own spin.
Yeah, they were particularly focused on eliminating unnecessary motion to reduce worker fatigue, not just purely for speed. They saw wasted movement as just waste.
And they came up with those Thurbligs, that funny name.
Right, Thurblig, it's basically Gilbreth backwards, more or less.
Okay.
These are like the basic building blocks of any movement. Search, find, select, grasp.
Into these tiny little actions.
Exactly. To analyze them really closely and see where effort was being wasted at a super granular level.
Frank Gilbreth felt pretty strongly about this wasted motion, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He had a quote about it being the biggest waste there is.
Wow. And I remember hearing they applied this to like everyday things. Didn't they analyze shaving?
We did. Famously, in the book Cheaper by the Dozen, Frank broke down shaving into Thurbligs.
Like search for the razor.
Find it, select, grasp, transport loaded, moving it to your face position. They even included think as a Thurblig.
His emotion, well, sort of.
In their system, it represented the mental planning part. But by breaking it down like that, why reach over there for the soap?
Incredible detail. And you said they also looked at fatigue, so there was some human consideration there.
Yes, they did study fatigue. So, while heavily focused on efficiency, they were also thinking about the physical toll on the worker, which was maybe a slight softening compared to pure Taylorism.
Okay. Taylor, Gilbreths, focused on the micro level, the task, the movement. Then there's Henry Gantt, project management guy, right?
That's him. Gantt shifted the focus a bit, looking more at the bigger picture of planning and scheduling whole projects. His big contribution, of course.
The Gantt chart. Still see those everywhere.
Absolutely ubiquitous. It's a visual timeline, basically.
How does it work, fundamentally?
You've got tasks listed, usually down the side, and time running along the bottom or top. Each task is a horizontal bar showing when it starts, when it ends, how long it takes.
And you can see overlaps, dependencies.
Exactly. You can see which tasks depend on others finishing first. And you can track progress, often by shading in the bars as work gets done. It gives you a really clear visual overview.
Yeah, super useful for keeping track of complex projects. Okay, so that's a snapshot of classical management. But it wasn't perfect, was it? What were the main knocks against it?
Well, the biggest criticism, and you can probably guess, is that it could be really dehumanizing.
Treat machines.
Pretty much. Overemphasis on efficiency, sometimes ignoring worker well-being. It often became really rigid.
Stifling innovation. Hard to adapt.
Yeah, that one best way doesn't leave much room for new ideas or changing circumstances. It's a very mechanistic view of organizations.
Right. But even with those flaws, it was important. It laid a foundation.
Oh, undeniably.
Yeah.
It established management as something you could study, systematize. It brought in principles of organization, process thinking, things we still rely on, even if we've evolved beyond the pure classical.
Human relations. This came about partly because of those criticisms, right?
Exactly. Mid-20th century, a growing sense that just focusing on the machine was missing something huge. The human relations movement really put the spotlight on, well, the humans.
And the timing was key too, wasn't it? What was going on then?
Big things. The lingering effects of the Industrial Revolution, the shock of the Great Depression, World War II, all these massive events made people think differently about society, work, and human motivation. It wasn't just human relations.
And the key players here, we've got Elton Mayo.
Abraham Maslow, Douglas McGregor, really pivotal figures.
Let's start with Mayo and the Hawthorne studies. These are legendary. What were they originally trying to find out?
Ironically, they started out very much in the classical mode. They went to the or would increase worker productivity.
Simple enough. Better lighting, more work.
That was the hypothesis, but the results were, well, confusing at first, then revolutionary. Just when they improved conditions.
Ah, the observer effect.
Exactly. The workers were changing their behavior because they knew they were being studied, because someone was paying attention to them. It wasn't necessarily the lights themselves.
So the key wasn't the physical stuff, but the psychological and social stuff.
Precisely. It blew the lid off the purely mechanistic view.
Informal groups, employee satisfaction. Things Taylor probably didn't spend much time on.
Not so much now. Mayo highlighted how important these were. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld summed it up well later.
What did he say?
He basically said Hawthorne shifted the focus from the machine view to the humane view.
Yeah.
These people, and cultural variables, as he called them, leads to underperformance.
On from Mayo, Abraham Maslow. Hierarchy of needs. Everyone sort of knows the pyramid, right?
Yeah, it's one of the most famous psychological concepts, especially in management. Studying healthy, achieving people, not just problems.
And he proposed this hierarchy, 5 levels.
Yep, starting at the bottom, the most basic. Physiological needs. Food, water, shelter, sleep, survival stuff.
Got it. Level 1.
Level 2, safety.
Okay, makes sense. Need safety before you worry about much else.
And level 3, love and belonging needs, social connection, friendship, intimacy, being part of a group.
The social aspect we just talked about with Hawthorne.
Yes, exactly. Level 4 is esteem needs. This is about self-respect, confidence, achievement.
Feeling competent and valued.
Right. And finally, at the very top, level 5, self-actualization. This is about fulfilling your potential, personal growth, creativity, seeking meaning, being the best version of yourself, essentially.
And the key idea is you have to satisfy the lower levels first, more or less.
That's the core theory. You're not going to be too worried about self-actualization at work if you're genuinely worried about losing your job tomorrow, that safety need is going to dominate, or, if you're not getting enough sleep.
So managers need to understand where their people are on this pyramid to motivate them effectively. You can't just offer an interesting project if someone's basic needs aren't met.
That's the implication. Now, it's worth saying the strict step-by-step nature has been debated. People might work on multiple levels at once, but priority, really influential.
Good point. Okay, one more key figure. Douglas McGregor. Theory X and Theory Y sounds like opposing forces.
They absolutely are. McGregor laid these out in his book, The Human Side of Enterprise. They represent two fundamentally different sets of assumptions managers might hold about employees.
Let's start with Theory X. What's that about?
Theory X is the pessimistic view. It assumes people inherently dislike work, are kind of lazy, avoid responsibility, and need to be coerced or controlled to be.
And in control. Micromanagement.
Pretty much. Authoritarian, lots of rules, close supervision, relying on punishment or threat of punishment.
Doesn't sound like a fun place.
Certainly not, no. Then you have Theory Y, which is the complete opposite.
The optimistic view.
Exactly. Theory Y assumes people can find work satisfying, that they are naturally motivated, creative, capable of self-direction, and willing to accept responsibility. Much more supportive, empowering, giving people autonomy, trusting them, creating opportunities for growth, involving them in decisions. It assumes people have intrinsic motivation.
A huge difference in how you'd approach managing people. I'm guessing Theory Y is generally seen as better these days.
Largely, yes. While real people are complex and maybe don't fit neatly into just one box, Theory Y aligns much better with modern ideas about engagement, empowerment, and creating positive work cultures. Theory X is often seen as leading to toxic environments.
Makes sense. So, pulling back to look at the whole human relations school, Mayo, Maslow, McGregor, what's the big picture contribution?
The massive shift really was bringing human factors front and center. It said, hey, efficiency and structure matter, but you cannot ignore leadership style, communication, all that stuff.
It recognized workers as complex individuals, not just cogs.
Exactly. With social needs, all influencing how they work. It emphasized that things like good morale, positive relationships, a sense of belonging, these aren't just nice to haves, they actually drive performance.
And this paved the way for fields like organizational behavior, modern HR.
Absolutely. It laid so much of the groundwork for understanding how people actually behave and thrive within organizations.
But like classical management, it wasn't the final word, right? Human relations had its critics too.
It did, yes. Some felt it swung the pendulum too far.
How so?
Critics argued it could overemphasize relationships and feelings, maybe neglecting the importance of clear structure, technology, or just getting the task done efficiently, sometimes called soft management.
A bit naive, maybe. Assuming everyone just wants to be happy and cooperative.
That was another criticism, a kind of naive optimism about human nature that conclusions were based on super rigorous scientific study compared to tailored.
And the potential for manipulation. Using human relations techniques to get people to do things without actually improving their situation.
That concern was raised too, yeah. Focusing on surface level happiness without addressing real problems like pay or working conditions.
So it sounds like neither school had all the answers. Classical was too rigid, maybe. Human relations potentially too soft or unstructured on its own.
That's a fair summary.
Yeah.
Each offered really valuable insights, but also had blind spots.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, thinking about this journey from classical to human relations, what are the main takeaways for our listener?
I think the key thing is seeing that evolution. Classical management gave us the essential tools for structure,
building blocks.
Right. But then human relations came along and added this crucial layer, the people layer. Hawthorne, Maslow, McGregor, reminding us that organizations are social systems and human motivation, needs, and relationships are absolutely critical to making them work well.
And remembering the limitations of both is vital. You can't just focus on efficiency and ignore people, but you also probably can't just focus on making people happy and ignore structure and results.
Exactly. The challenge then and now is finding that balance. Understanding these historical roots helps us understand why that balance is so important and maybe why we still struggle with it sometimes.
Because these ideas, even though they're historical, they still echo today, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They underpin so many contemporary management theories and practices, whether we explicitly realize it or not. And traces back to these foundational ideas.
So here's something to chew on. Think about your own workplace, or even just how you approach tasks or group projects. Can you see echoes of classical management, the drive for the one best way, the focus on metrics? Or maybe more human relations, the emphasis on teamwork, well-being, autonomy?
Or perhaps more likely, a mix of both, maybe even some tension between them. It's fascinating to think about how these century-old ideas might still be shaping our work lives today.
Definitely something to reflect on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.